What's interesting to me about the CCSS in mathematics is that we have been actually inviting schools to participate and develop and design curriculum and instruction and assessment very much like we're going to describe in this course. We've been asking schools, inviting them to do that for almost 20 years. Now, if you just think about that, since 1991, when the curriculum evaluation standards came out from NCTM, those were a very clear set of standards that said this is what every child K-12 needs to learn in order to be better prepared for college and career. This is how students ought to learn it. These are instructional practices that we really value: problem solving, communicating, representations, reasoning, connections to other disciplines within the discipline itself. You know, all of these ways that students ought to experience mathematics and the tasks of doing mathematics. In this particular course, one of the things that we're going to do is we look at the 5 significant paradigm shifts that have to happen if we really are going to finally bridge that gap between what we've been saying we need to do for 20 years and what we now actually need to do. The first paradigm shift is significant to professional development. In that paradigm shift, we're saying that professional development can no longer be an event and an isolated act. That professional development is a process. It's an ongoing thing that you do as a classroom teacher. You do this every week, every month, every year, forever. And you do it not alone, but with others. So it becomes a collaborative process. And in our particular description for this paradigm, we actually use the idea of professional learning communities at work, where we define grade level teams as a collaborative team, working 3rd grade teachers, 6th grade teachers, 8th grade teachers, or perhaps a course in junior high often, or in high school it's a course where you might have a 7th grade math course or a pre-algebra class. Regardless of how that's put together, those content-based teams of teachers work together. The question, of course, is once you have your collaborative team and your 5th grade teams coming together to do work, or your 7th grade math teams coming together to do work, the question becomes, of course, what should that work be? So our next 4 units all lay out what we believe should be the exact kinds of work that you should do in order to be better prepared for the expectations and the vision of the Common Core. So, Unit 2 actually describes instruction. It's really about the mathematical practices. And in the Common Core State Standards, there are 8 mathematical practices. Now, the paradigm shift is that the teaching of mathematics is no longer just about skills and just about low-level cognitive knowledge, which is what it's traditionally dumbed down to. The paradigm shift for instruction, and through the standards themselves, as we'll explain in Unit 2, really says, well, you know what? No, we have to go after conceptual understanding first. And that will be our primary focus of our lesson designs in instruction, that students can actually demonstrate their understanding. And through that, they'll be able to, of course, improve their own procedural fluency. So it's really, we want both. Now, Unit 3 really focuses on the content itself. What are some of the content shifts that are happening? I've already alluded to some of them, because the major content shift is that there will be fewer standards per grade level. What we hope to see in that paradigm shift is a much deeper curriculum. So taking that broad curriculum and shrinking it down, but teaching it more deeply. Now, that's a paradigm shift for teachers, because right now we don't teach that way. We teach a lot of stuff at a very superficial level. So learning for teachers, learning their own content knowledge to be able to create tasks like you're going to see during these units, or to be able to to assess and advance those tasks well with students, is part of the goal of Unit 3. Unit 4 focuses on really the professional learning community question of how will we know if students have learned what we want them to learn? How will we know? So how are we going to assess that? How are we going to assess that in the classroom? How are we going to assess that on the kind of the daily interactions we have with kids? How are we going to assess that with assessment instruments such as quizzes and tests? How do we know those quizzes and tests are any good? How do we even know that we're grading them fairly? How do we know that there's a consistent way in which we provide feedback through our assessments? So Unit 4 deals with everything you need to know in order to do your school or math program or local grade level assessment really well, so that when students do encounter the state assessment, it's really not that big a deal, because they're so well prepared by what we do in our local classroom. Unit 5 really gets at part of the assessment picture, which is, okay, so here's what we want Common Core State Standard says, here's what we want all students to know and learn, right? And then we have this great assessment process that says, and here's how we're going to know it. The big question then becomes, okay, and what will be your teacher response when you don't know it? So the paradigm shift for that is that our primary response when students aren't learning the expected learning targets and standards in a particular grade level or course, our typical response is just to have them do some type of extra work or some type of additional program, but without it being really required. It's often very happenstance. So, we're going to have this program after school and you guys really should come. Do I have to? No. It's not. So our paradigm shift is that all forms of what now is being called response to intervention, which is how we respond when kids don't learn, our response is that it has to be required response to intervention, that children don't have a choice but to not get the additional support and help they need. And we see 3 tiers in that response, and we'll talk about those tiers actually in Unit 5.